Welcome in Compyl Security Sessions. I have with me, as always, thought leaders in the security world, and today we are going to discuss the topic of safeguarding trust for financial institutions. We have with us Stas and Will, as always, but today our special guest is going to be Mark. Mark, welcome. Thanks for joining us, and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here. I'm Mark Ashworth. I am the CISO for First Bank. We're located out of the St. Louis area, but we're in 5 states with about half of our business out in the California region. And otherwise, Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas, and Nebraska. So, happy to be here. I got 4 teams. Just give you a little more background on my oversight. I have 4 teams that's associated with me. I have physical security, cyber, our financial crimes, as well as our network services team. So I get quite a broad little perspective on things that's going on. That's for sure. So
that's cool. Does the money laundering stuff fall under you too?
No, not yet, at least, and I'm okay with that. So
I always find it super interesting, but yeah, it's like really it's a different world.
Yeah, all the fraud and everything around the fraud side. AML is still over with our risk team and is managed by them. I work very closely with them. We work very, my teams do, and so we talk a lot. So lots of great guys over there, but I'm glad they do what they do, and then we do what we do.
Fair. I was going to say, Mark, with that kind of responsibility, are you sure you're able to cram that into a 40-hour week, or is it a little wider?
Yeah. Well, obviously it's always constantly going and everything like that, but we try to do our best, keep our hours down as much as possible, because otherwise it just gets burnt out. I think it's probably harder on my networking team more so than anything, because of updates at night or troubleshooting issues and that sort of things. I worry more about them a lot of times than I do my other teams on that. But with the uptick in fraud and everything, my financial crime side is definitely seeing a lot more activity, and just one incident of that takes a long period of time. It's not something, with investigations and everything else that has to be done. So there's a lot of manual effort involved, even though we try to automate as much as we can. And obviously the detection side and everything is, a lot of machine learning and AI that's associated with that, but to help find it. But it's daunting. I mean, no matter how you look at it, there's, we ingest so much stuff, and there's so many alerts, and then all the transactions and everything going on, daily. I mean, there's just a lot going on in trying to find, those needles in a haystack, so to speak. So. Yeah,
for sure. Well, Mark, I think you touched on quite a bit there, and we're going to dive into it. To set the stage, really, this is kind of, the overview. So in an era where data breaches and cyber threats dominate headlines, the need for robust InfoSec and compliance programs is more critical than ever. So for financial institutions, this plays a pivotal role in safeguarding our hard-earned money. They become prime targets for cyber criminals seeking to exploit vulnerabilities and gain unauthorized access to sensitive information. Today, we explore why a strong InfoSec and compliance program is not only essential for the survival of banks, but also to maintain the trust and confidence in their customers. So, Mark, you kind of alluded to this, and I'm going to throw it right back to you. How do banks strike the delicate balance between providing convenient and accessible digital banking while ensuring a robust InfoSec measures are in place to protect their customers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's tricky because, security is not inherently easy in a lot of ways, but, so there's really a prone approach that, banks have to do. They, between educating and their clientele and making sure people's aware of, the threats that's out there and the scams and all that. But then also, as they access their information, to provide the right controls in place. And, I think most people are accustomed now of, getting MFA challenges and those sort of things. And so that, that obviously is a huge part and a big step to help reduce, you know, a lot of that. Obviously, there's improvements that can be done, and maybe someday we might be passwordless and you know, done in the right way there. But you know, that's not the world we're living in right now, so we've got to kind of deal what we need to. But then, you know, in the environments and the systems themselves of having the right checks in place and doing the proper validation, you know, whether it's on online account opening and validating who they are, and you know, really that whole know your customer or KYC component of it. It's definitely challenging to continue to make it easy for the bank customers to get the data, but then also provide them secure. So.
Here on the KYC part, I worked with a lot of different organizations in the past, and that, you know, even, you know, on the technology side, there's a big push on that, right? Because financial institutions, you guys have more data that you can make use of than you're actually making use of most of the time, in my experience, right? There's all kinds of like better way, not from the security perspective, but from the, you know, from the customer service standpoint, and what kind of, you know, how they leverage that data. As I understand it, most of that is kind of like you're kind of forced to share that data externally because other people can kind of process it or give you the right information, kind of help you, you know, read into that, or whether there's analytics to figure out, hey, you know, this type of customer is consuming these type of services, so we should sell them this type of stuff. So just where I'm getting to is like, with all of that need to share sort of externally to, you know, in order for the business to run, there's a lot of sharing that has to come. How are you guys, like, sort of what's the best way to manage that? And knowing you're probably not 100% in the cloud either, right? For sure.
That was literally
Yeah.
Yeah. Most FSI isn't, right?
Yeah, I don't think everyone's 100% in the cloud, especially you know, if they're, you know, any sort of age to them. I mean, we're a fourth generation bank, and you know, privately owned, you know, and family owned. So you know, we have a lot in the cloud, but then, you know, it's still not everything. You know, the whole sharing of the data, we don't share the data, so we don't share your, you know, what you're doing transactionally, you know, that sort of thing. So and I think a lot of banks don't. I think that's happening in the other, more of the retail spaces, and how they're you know, and through programs through probably Visa or MasterCard or American Express, you know, those sort of areas is where that intelligence is really coming from. And I'm, you know, probably, you know, maybe some of the bigger banks might do that, but I know for us at First Bank, we don't share, you know, where you're going, what you've been doing, and those sort of things. So, and I think, I haven't really looked at it from that perspective, but I mean, there might be some compliance regulations around GLBA that might prevent, you know, banks from doing that. So that's a good one. I have to ask my compliance people.
I was just curious. It's one of those things where, yeah, obviously you're not going to grant access to it, but you know, somebody over here has an AI or a, you know, or a bunch of data that's really helpful at making decisions on what to do with, you know, with certain trends that your organization's seeing. So sometimes it's metadata, and it was just kind of curious as to how that will work out. And yeah, definitely, you're right. I see a lot of that in the retail space for sure. Like, you know, how do we get the most out of our, how, you know, they'll say, how do I provide the best service to my customers? But it's really, you know, how do I sell more? Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How can I take that intelligence that I have and make more money off of it?
Exactly. Yeah. I have all of this. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I just had a question around the KYC process, because like I know a lot of organizations used to be like, my background's financial services and information security, and like I just remember that the KYC process was always very, very manual for larger organizations. And I'm just wondering if there's been, you know, a push into robotics or machine learning on that side as well.
Yeah. I think in the short answer, yes. You know, there's areas where you know, the systems might not allow for API or something like that to you know, easily integrate to handle that, and so RPA is being used to streamline processes. I think a lot of that's really on the back end side, though, on, you know, the operational components of that versus the KYC component of it. But it definitely, you know, could very well be that, you know, but really, you know, when you kind of get into the KYC, you're either integrating with other platforms in order to validate, is this person who they say they are, and those sort of things. Or you're running, like historical to find out, which products they're using within your organization and how many people are using that, and how can I potentially change my selling patterns or stuff within your the financial institution. So but RPA, I do, you do hear a lot. It's definitely a huge buzzword that's out there, and I think I get about a dozen vendors saying that they can solve all of my problems with RPA a day.
Yeah.
But
Wonder what they sell.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
but there's definitely a lot of back end that is helpful, and get some of those redundant tasks that's being done, and then better align your workforce to be doing other things in operations to take care of things. So yeah, it's definitely I think a thing that a lot of companies are doing to help streamline some operations.
Cool.
That's great. Stas, I'm pretty familiar with your background in the financial service world. And Will, I'm curious, with these types of emerging technology, right? So AI, blockchain, kind of coming into the banking world, this, there has to be a balance of how a bank can, reap those benefits of using tech like that, but also mitigate potential risks. Will, I'm curious on your end, if you've kind of heard of this with customers you've dealt with, or seen any ways banks are kind of handling kind of that migration using some of this newer technology.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you mentioned, like in my experience, the financial services are the last to the cloud for a lot of organizations, really wanting to keep some of their hands, or not, and I mean obviously consuming some cloud services, things like SaaS, but kind of getting rid of the data centers, or some of there's a lot of legacy things going on there in those organizations as well too. But it's interesting because I did, like, I remember when Metaverse came out, like, and that was a big deal. Like, some of the first organizations we had engaging with us were financial institutions trying to figure out, hey, how can we leverage this? How can we use this? And so, in those cases, you would run, essentially a POC or some thought, strategy planning, where you would kind of see what you could build up and do and kind of model it out, right? And to try and figure out, okay, how are you going to leverage this? And then I think one of the ways that leads into, I think one of the big things, and kind of hit on it, Mark hit on it a little minute ago, about authentication, authorization. As we move further and further away from, everything being in person, whether it's the metaverse or whether it's just, general, like, I never go to my bank, right? I mean, my bank's not, I don't even have a branch in the state I live in, right? So, and that's just the way it is. So, but as we move further and further away, the identity becomes super, super important, right? So you start looking at decentralized identity and verified credentials. You start looking at things better than SMS technology, right? There's a few banks in Singapore who can attest to, how that worked out for them, right? So I think there's a balance in trying to, in my experience, financial services has always been very good at not running in too fast, versus like retail and tech. We're kind of, quick to adopt because they have to, and then slap the security on later. Part of that's probably, and Mark can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but there's this long list of acronyms that are required before they want to do anything that they have to do. And in my experience, things like systems acquisitions process and vendor management's much better in the financial services space than a lot of other industries.
Yeah, and I think part of that's because of just the Fed oversight and OCC oversight on having us look at our vendors and really working with that and the contracts and stuff. And I've been in many other industries, and the vendor management process is very loose, and anyone can sign anything. There's no standards and legal reviews and everything. I mean, but meanwhile, the managers pulling out their hair because it's like, why did they do this deal? So it is a lot better, but it's also an educational process too, of getting that. And over my time here at the bank, we've been really pushing the vendor management process and getting security involved in the review. And so, I'm part of that, as well as my team in different areas, I'm on the contractual side reviewing those contracts while they're doing the security due diligence with the vendor, or third party or fourth party, even for that perspective. So so it is a something that all companies should be doing, not just banks, to really be watching that, because there's a lot of very shady stuff that people will try to put in some of those contracts, and without the right people looking at it, you can really do some harm, especially if it does become a problem with that vendor. So
yeah, and the tricks, well, obviously, making sure everybody adheres to it, right? So if you have an organization that's not necessarily security aware, or you've got an organization where every business unit can kind of they have their own budget and buys their own things, and you got like way too much shadow IT out there, right? It makes it harder to say, hey, when you're procuring this new solution or this new app, or because somebody in marketing is like, oh, this cool new app came out, we should buy this and use it, and they're like, oh yeah, that sounds great, here, buy it. And it doesn't go through that process to say, oh, well, is it going to be compliant with what kind of data we're going to feed it? What are all those checklists? You have to have a way to it's a challenge, because a lot of times it's manual, right? Everybody has to understand that process exists and then adopt and adhere to it. And not everybody's going to want to do that sometimes. The other part of that, right? Good, bad, or indifferent, I guess.
Yeah.
But also, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Star.
I
was just going to say, it provides insight for security and IT to know what might be coming in, and because people are, they're buying this stuff and they're like, oh, this would be great, blah, blah. Well, there's compatibility issues with this, and this. This is going to cause this sort of, integration problems and those sort of things. And because they didn't bring IT in, and which they don't all the time. And
Right.
so, that oversight can really kind of help flag things up of potential issues that might prevent that, or you hope to keep that from moving forward if it's going to be major, or they can accept that risk and know, okay, this is going to increase our deployment time by 30% or something like that. So sorry, Stas, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, on the vendor management side, right? I think things have just changed so much, even in the past like 5 years. Like I remember in like 2018 getting due diligence questionnaires, and if it said cloud, you get extra scrutiny. And now it's kind of flipped, where like if it doesn't say cloud, you get extra scrutiny. So like it's just it's just a really interesting space, and just staying on top of it is you just have to be very organized and have a really good process in place. But it sounds like you guys were saying, the financial services definitely has a lot more processes around that, whereas a lot of other companies are really struggling with it. And then other companies are really relying on like other platforms where they kind of skip the traditional vendor management and go to like scoring approaches and things. And my experience with that is doesn't work very well. But I was just chiming in.
Yeah, well, and some of it, you got to look at what's driving it, right? Those organizations, like I worked with a healthcare organization in the past that had, I think, like 10,000 vendors, right? And in that case, you can't manage that the same way that you can a small amount of vendors, right? So he had to create a sort of a streamlined process and kind of tier people into groups, and like, here's who you care about more than others, and based on the type of access, which is the right way to do it.
Absolutely.
But it's a lot to deal with, right? And there's so much interconnectivity required today to kind of just to make business work, that you have to address it, right? Whether it's just answering a 200 questionnaire, which is kind of typical in like SMB space, right? That kind of stuff, or whether you're actually doing some type of like we're actually seeing today, like we're using our tax service validation, tax service management solutions to kind of help with that, some vendor management stuff, right? Because it's not just like you said. Yeah, I know there's companies out there that will basically scan your website and give you a score, right? And that may or may not be, what's actually giving you a really valid risk rating. So kind of taking, advantage of some of that dark web technology, some of the threat intelligence, and putting something together a little more comprehensive is my recommendation, at least, right?
Yeah. Something that I think the three of you have touched on, but I wanted to dive a little deeper on, is just the idea of fostering a strong security culture within an organization, especially at a bank. Having, the potential to lose trust, lose customers, lose money, or be fined. Mark, is there anything that you feel is, you know, at First Bank that you guys do that fosters a strong security culture? Or is there anything you've seen maybe in your industry that you were kind of like, wow, that maybe is could strengthen, you know, an organization's posture?
Yeah, you know, it's it's all about education and building those relationships within your environment, really. And you know, that's one thing that I strive is to try to educate. It's why I do these things too, you know. So it not only provides you know, education for our people outside of the organization on maybe what we're doing as a bank, but because you know, hopefully the thought there is if I'm talking about it, maybe we're doing this stuff, or maybe other banks are doing this stuff, so you can have some trust there in your financial institution. But internally, it's really building those relationships with the other business units, and then providing that education to the employees of this is why you need to do this is why you need to do that, and then test them, you know. Um, uh, you know, let's take fishing for example. That, you know, that's one of the easiest way to bring awareness, and based off of that, you grow from there. And you know, when you get stopped in the hallway, hey, I was thinking of you the other day. I got this email at home, and it looked like this, and this. So you know, I immediately thought it was spam, so I just deleted it. You know, so thank you. You know, then you know you're doing something right when people are stopping you and telling you about those things. Or I was thinking about you. You know, it's like and so you know, those are the things that you really want. And then uh or if you're getting a random meeting request about some sort of thing, and you're finding out this is some product that, you know, someone's looking at, you know, at that point you know that other people are being engaging, they're wanting to do the right thing, they're wanting to bring security in and make sure that they're, you know, doing what's needed to be done to protect the bank. Because when it's all about there, it's really protecting the customers and their data, as well as the employee data, because you got employee data too to worry about. And so you know, having that education and then those relationships helps bring that in and foster a good security culture.
I love the personal linking. Every time I've ever done any kind of awareness training, I've usually been asked to, if I didn't include it anyway, to make sure that, you know, I address stuff that those individuals can use at home, right, to help them understand like how social media or traveling with Wi-Fi back in the day, all that stuff. And I actually had a client, a large client, have us prepare a, you know, a presentation specifically for them to kind of help educate them at that base level. So, you know, we got to deliver it to thousands of people. You know, we got to create a nice little piece of content to give out to them, and then, you know, recording. And then on top of that, you know, we got it was kind of smart on their part that we peppered in kind of things like, oh, MFA, and here's why it's important because we're adopting that. And like, so kind of, you know, you know, I talk about a lot about how I wish I could remember who told me this, but some CISO back in the day said chief inside selling officer. That's what a CISO is for, right? And that's really what it is. Like going to everybody else, all the other business units, and making sure they know, hey, here's why we're doing this. Here's how it's going to help the business. It's not just like, you don't want to block people from getting things done. You want to enable everything. You know, I want all the technology in there. I just want you to do it the right way and make it secure.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's other companies that are they're providing. So I've seen companies where, like, password management, if you buy their enterprise version, they'll actually give you a personal version as well, and they'll encourage like you know, letting your family members use it as well, which I think is a really good touch.
Awesome.
Yeah, and on the security and awareness training, I mean, I think it's come a long way in the past couple of years, but like the adaptive phishing training where you don't even know when it's going to come out yourself, you just set it up and then it goes, and then it adjusts to your organization. I think those are some pretty innovative steps that we've taken as an industry, and also like being able to provide training that's not just not for the entire organization, but you can, you know, divvy it up for developers or, you know, HR or compliance. I think that really just goes a long way. And I just remember that being really difficult in the past. And I think I mean, there's still ways to go. There's always going to be you know, room to grow into this, but I think it's definitely going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's fair. At least to me, I've seen that looks to be pretty recent. And I mean, like within the last 5 years, I mean, somewhere down the line, the research was done and we figured out once a year is not enough. Like you need it in short, like 2 to 3 minutes, a few times a week. you know, we figured out the phishing thing, all that, you know. So you know, I'm curious though, because and I haven't seen, you know, on the consulting side, you know, we're always talking about, you know, the chat, you know, what are my CISO company and my company's clients struggling with, and we always, you know, we see training as kind of being that lacking area. So I'm wondering, Mark, maybe you know, like not just within your area, but maybe your other CISO colleagues, like, are you able to get the funding you need to kind of put all of that stuff in, or is everybody still focused on technology solutions first? Like, or are they, you know, have we really come into a point where they said, yeah, no, we get it. Security awareness training is necessary and requires, because I mean, I've put together proposals where, like you said, Seth, we're going to build specific training for developers. We're going to build training for, you know, HR staff or IT staff. And, you know, I've taken some of these tests and given feedback. Like when I get a phishing email, like, this is a joke. Of course I'm going to get, you know, I'm not going to, you know, this one's really easy. Make it harder for me. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think it is challenging for companies. You know, when I talk to my other colleagues, you know, in other industries and stuff, to get those, you know, training dollars, or out of anything, it's probably the resources to vet the training to be able to send that out. You know, I know one or two of my friends, they're fortunate they have like a marketing training person, you know, and that's associated with security. It's like, man, I would love to have that. I mean, there'd be just so much more I could do. But you know, it's being able to get those resources and be able to do that, and then if you don't have that type of budget to do it, then it's a matter of, you know, having someone be able to go through and look for the training and then coordinate it and getting it out. And
A lot of work.
you know, there's, you know,
Yeah.
especially in a highly regulated, there's so much training that has to be done regularly. There's also that fatigue, that training fatigue that goes on. And so you got to keep that in mind too, because it's not just you that's trying to train, it's everyone else trying to train, and some of it is regulatory reasons that you have to do it, and so that makes it challenging to balance all that and not and keeping people efficient on it. You know, when we do the you know, in October, the Cyber Awareness Month, you know, you mentioned, Will, earlier about keeping or having the training where you can use it and apply it at home. We try to provide, you know, 90% of those tips, if not more, to be to where you can share it with other people, you know, and here's a tip, and you go, don't do this, or go do this, and or make this setting change, or whatever it might be on your phone, or, you know, whatever it might be, to where, you know, it's benefiting not just, you know, our employees, but hopefully their families and friends too.
For sure.
That's great. Well, I wanted to just wrap this up with a quick common question for each of you. So something I was just thinking about was, I wanted to know if any of you guys are seeing any trends currently that you think are going to have a large impact on security professionals over the next 5 to 6 months, as we, you know, are kind of wrapping up this year. Stas, I'll start with you. Anything you're seeing that you think is going to be more of a trend, more than a trend?
I was wondering if we're all going to say the same thing. I mean, the number one trend I'm seeing right now is just the AI and phishing. It's just so prevalent right now, and it's become really, really good. So there's no more like grammatical errors, and, you know, the English is perfect. So it's a lot easier to you know, to craft a really good looking email or text message or whatever it is. And then, you know, with the other basic technologies that have existed for a long time, duplicating a website, putting it in the link, it's become really, really simple. And just going to Mark's point about fatigue, well, he's talking about training fatigue, but now there's MFA fatigue. So just another whack-a-mole. So like that's what we're seeing, and we're seeing a lot of it. So going back to the need for more training and awareness.
Interesting. Will, how about yourself?
Well, I'm glad you said AI, because I didn't want to, as much as I see it. Like, it's just, I get it. I don't want to talk about it anymore, though. No, I do think, you know, two things on security operations side is, you know, the attack surface management, attack surface validation, you know, CASM. There's a whole lot of different, you know, acronyms around, hey, I'm no longer looking just inside my walls. I want to see what the bad guys see also, right? What's their viewpoint? What's out there? I feel like that's going to start, helping. That's going to take off and become more and more, less of a marketing term and more of a real item. And along with that kind of goes sort of the evolution of the SOC, right? I don't think SIM goes away, but because of EDR and XDR, as it develops and becomes something more, we start pushing. I don't know the right way to say it, but like to me, it's pushing more of the intelligence and the decision making to the edge or to the the source of what's happening, whether that's the endpoint or whether that's identity or it's the OT. So I think that sort of modernizing those security operations, that coincides with that new technology as well as leveraging automation, right? Because the more mundane tasks you can do, the more advanced things you can do, the more engaged you can keep your people in the SOC, which means they're going to be happier and they're going to stay there or want to grow up in the organization. So I think, yeah, the SOC and the ASM side of things for me.
Cool. And Mark, what you could finish this one off.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I hope to see. How about that? So I hope to see more organizations going back to the fundamentals of security, the segmentation, the application control, or whitelisting, however you want to phrase it, continuous monitoring and getting those areas more well defined in their organizations, and then products that will better align with that and make it an easier process on the security and IT teams to implement, to monitor, and to maintain versus the way some of these systems are right now. And I think some of the areas, especially, as you see more around SASE and VPN solutions and micro-segmentation, I think you'll continue to see that grow and become more mature. I think as they're doing this, they need to make sure that they are keeping those legacy systems that might be high latency or latency sensitive in mind when they do these solutions, versus just assuming everything's web-based or RDP or something like that, and easy type fix. And that's not the case. There's millions of applications out there that just can't work in that model. And so that's where I kind of hope things are going and where things will be at, and we're seeing it. And I think we're seeing some push from that. The government's kind of helping push that and bring that awareness, as well as other agencies to drive that down from the board level on down. And I think as executives are becoming more aware and understanding and seeing the risk to the organization, they're starting to ask more questions around that line, and I think that'll help an improvement too.
For sure. I think that's spot on. Like the fundamentals is usually something that I always end on, because the fundamentals are always, you put them in place and then you forget to maintain them, and then the cracks form, and then it's like 90% of the time it's one of the fundamental missing pieces of the security program is either not there or it's not maintained, and that's how you get in. And it's never like the fancy tools that you buy and you forget to interconnect and take the data and do something with it. It's always the fundamentals that you fall down on.
I would argue a lot of that ties to if you have a good zero trust strategy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those terms, a lot of people will say zero trust existed years ago, or but they just didn't have a name for it, right? And well, yeah, but it is pretty simple. It comes down to that segmentation, that just-in-time access, that credentials. Yeah, and it's all fundamental stuff. It's just doing it like in a different framework.
Because it was really difficult to do in the past, right? And everything was fragmented and non-interconnected.
Especially in this world where we're kind of coming out of now, where it was like, oh, that we've got rid of all these data centers, or we stopped owning all these data centers, and now we moved to the SASE world. Oh, we just put it all, and we forgot to take the security with it. And so now I think we're at a point where we've decided to come together as one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark.
Oh, go ahead, Stas.
No, I was just thinking, it's funny because I think that too, right? But you still see identity access management providers are still very much in demand, and and still crushing it quarter on quarter. So there's still there's still holes there.
I talk to kids all the time. I say kids. I talk to people wanting to get into the industry, and I'm like, You get into application security or get into identity, and you'll be good
Oh man,
for a while.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, Microsoft. I mean, they're on like their third product for just identity access management, right? I mean, they have, yeah. I mean, if Microsoft is struggling with it, everybody's struggling with it.
there
Yeah.
are companies who make money just making products to make the Microsoft stuff easier to use.
Exactly.
The big capabilities there, but it gets complicated. I'm sorry, Dan. We've gone off topic.
No, this was great. I really enjoyed it, and thanks, Stas, Will, Mark. Thanks for your time today. This was a great discussion, and kind of, I think what we try to do here on Security Sessions is really just bring thought leadership together and share knowledge. That's all we're trying to do. Whether it's somebody looking to get into this space or has been in this space a long time and just wants maybe a new viewpoint on topics we're covering, that's the kind of stuff we're looking to do. So thank you again, and Mark, till next time.